SME manufacturing in the UK dead or alive, but I think that we all know that manufacturing in the UK is very much alive. It's a major part of the UK economy. These are figures from Make UK, and okay, they want to show the shiniest of the figures. So I think manufacturing, we can agree, is well and truly alive. But how about for the smaller guys? And so for this, I'm going to take you back a little way. I'm going to take you back to 13th century France, in fact. Nick, why are you taking me to 13th century France? Well, this actually isn't 13th century France. This is a modern reconstruction of a 13th century chateau. And the reason I'm taking you here is to start to think about materials. So these guys wanted to recreate this 13th century chateau using the materials and the labor and the techniques available to them in 13th century France. So what I'm going to require a little bit of involvement here. So what materials do we need to build the 13th century chateau? Come on, shout out.
Stone, wood, rope,
sand,
mud. Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah, you're spot on right. So we need stone. We need wood, in this case oak. We need clay for roofing tiles. We need water, sand, and of course labour. So where are you going to build your chateau? Now you may have a strategic reason for building it somewhere. This particular chateau was rebuilt, and they started off by looking at where they could get their resources. Resources are really important. The materials are important, but also so is the labour, because without all those things coming together, it doesn't work. So they built it on a source of stone. They built it where they could have consistent supply of both material and raw materials at a consistent quality, at a consistent cost of actually free in this case, but also where the labour could be brought in easily. But then you require skilled labour to turn those lumps of stone into things that you can actually build with. Nick, why are you talking about a 13th century chateau? Because the same lessons apply in manufacturing. It's all about components that are made from raw materials, but labour is just as important. After you've got those materials, you also need the labour to turn those into products, so assembling them into a thing. The reason that we use Far Eastern manufacturing is because they're very, very good at that assembling of components into things. So we can mechanise an awful lot of it these days. This is a huge stone cutting saw, and it's one of my clients that I love, and I love a good factory visit. But what it's also to highlight is that we don't exist in a place where it's a level playing field. And we forget that at our cost. So what is SME manufacturing? It's components or goods made from a raw material. It's post-production processes applied to those components to take them from a single stage component. So even a bottle like this, it has a manufacturing process, but it then has a finish. It has additional processes that go onto it. And then these assemblies of components are created, put together, and then can be sold as products. This playing field is not level and never will be. By that, I mean that we are dealing with a place with different economic values around the world and different reliances on disposable workforces. Manufacturing is international. This isn't anything new to you guys. And people are price driven. You're also not unfamiliar with that. But what this means is that if we can buy it cheaper, we will. Unless something else pushes us to considering, well, what is the benefit in a race to the bottom? Now, we've all been in a situation where we've made decisions going, do I want to buy this because it is the cheapest? Or do I care about how it's made, where it's made, what it's made from, and the effect that that is having on our planet, on our society, on our lives? That's one of the big changes. SME manufacturing in the UK is thriving in a lot of places. One of my favourite examples of this is Brompton Cycles. They have a huge manufacturing plant in West London, in Greenford, and they make world-beating products, and they're expanding rapidly. But also, they do it with a workforce that are engaged, excited, and part of their family. Going to their manufacturing facility is the joy. But I've been to small manufacturing facilities that are almost family. A company that I work with in Manchester that makes cast iron radiators, going around their factory that's about the size of 4 tennis courts, and you just come out smiling because it feels like how it should be done. It feels like they have joy and pride in their products, and they're making a world-beating product that gets exported all over the place. That's SME manufacturing at its best. The other side of the world makes products that are cheaper, that are very good, but have no interest in applying the extra cost of health and safety or worrying about the people that get damaged or worn out in doing it. We all own goods that have components from these kind of companies in them. We all choose not to think about what goes into some of the things that we buy, that we use, that we throw away and replace. Until more people care about what we buy and what we make, these kind of factories are always going to exist. If it's a race to the bottom for price, they will always reach the bottom before us because they don't care. That's the worst of it. Well, in fact, that's not the worst of it because you've got a man using this, not a child. I work a lot in China, and I've got a lot of respect for the best of how it's done. But one of the interesting things is that they also have a very young workforce that are very highly skilled, very dexterous, and very cheap. Now, if you are an SME manufacturer in the UK, can you find somebody to assemble your product in the UK at this level of quality for this level of price? No, you can't. So what these guys are assembling is this very light. And I spent times with these guys on the production line, and I tried to put this gasket on, which is a little double-sided tape gasket. I spent an hour trying to get one right. These guys were doing 4 a minute. It was a humbling experience, and they laughed at me. No, they eventually felt that they could at least chuckle at me because they didn't want to lose face. And I was humbled by the level of skill that they have. And that's something that's very, very difficult to find in the UK. This is sounding a bit depressing. It's not supposed to. So, UK manufacture, hell yes. I'm a great fan of UK manufacture. There are a lot of reasons why it works well and can be very, very effective. You've got control in a way that you have not got when you send it overseas. You're communicating in a language that everyone understands. Not to be underestimated how wonderful that can be. You've got access to specialist processes that sometimes are only available in the UK, or the combinations are only available in the UK. We often talk about intellectual property concerns when sending things overseas. And we've all heard horror stories about products being copied, and it does happen. Sometimes we have to break products being manufactured into 2 or 3 separate companies and then have them assembled by another company, just to make sure that people haven't got all of the bits of one product in one place at one time. Lead times. If you're not shipping from overseas, you're cutting out a huge amount of lead time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and of course all the costs involved in it. You've got the UK law for dispute resolution, and quality control is much easier if you're watching the product being manufactured. Now, these are all reasons why I absolutely manufacture in the UK whenever I can. But there's a flip side of it. In the UK, you've got a very high minimum order quantity quite often, because the costs of setting it up, a lot of UK manufacturers are not willing to defer future profit or offset current costs against potential future orders. Unreliable delivery at small quantities can be an issue, because again, it costs a lot to set it up in the UK. We do have problems with inconsistent staff quality. That's a personal feeling, and I'm sure there are lots of manufacturers that would disagree with that. Lead times can be very variable and do have a nasty habit of slipping. This next one is one of my real bugbears. You don't matter unless you're spending £1 million plus. That sounds a bit dramatic, but unfortunately, that unless you are spending and spending and spending, there's little interest in you as a company until you're putting big bucks on the table. And one of the bigger problems that I have is the idea of a joined up service provider. So somebody to manufacture, that can also package, that can also ship, but most importantly, but at the manufacture stage can do the complex assembly, and will take ownership of the whole thing, right down to fulfillment if necessary.
Nick, just a quick question from me.
Yeah.
You know, I love UK manufacturing. I had a site in London. It was just under 13,000 square feet. Manufacturing all day long, 6, maybe 7 days a week sometimes. And people thought we were mad. But we were doing it back then for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons was we were concerned about bringing lots of containers over from China. We had a lead on our competitors, but also we had one eye on the environmental impacts and regulations, which are getting tighter each year. How much do you think that's going to sway people to start onshoring manufacturing?
I think that the playing field will become more level. because I think that that one, it's important to people at a personal level, but also at a corporate level, where the difference between it being influenced by their buying public and what the buying public wants, but also on the flip side, it being influenced by being forced to comply to stricter and stricter environmental regulation. So I think that that we will see that that becomes more important as the years go on. There will always be people that are willing to work around it, and so I think a lot of it is about making sure that the customers are valuing the care that you are taking, which means you need to communicate the care that you're taking, and the fact that you're saying, well, I could buy this cheaper, or I could be less careful, but actually I'm not going to do that, because and so I think that it's, and I'll come on to this a little bit, the way out of it, and I'll talk with it a little bit further down the line. So I'll keep the answer for that for a little bit further down the line, Ollie. So, I think that one of the questions that we've got to ask, in exactly the way, same way that you did, Ollie, was: is UK manufacturing right for your product? And at the moment, there are some products that it is absolutely right for, and there's some products that it is much more challenging for. So I'll take you through two of my product journeys really rapidly. So this, have any of you got pets that are a little bit old that you have to mash up pills for? That part of anyone's life?
No.
Oh, you're lucky if it isn't.
I've got one that's not old, but occasionally I have to give it stuff, and it is hard work.
Yeah. So
it can even work out. You can even see the tiny bits of it in the food and avoid them.
Yeah. So this is a little pill grinder that we designed for a client of ours, and it's got motor in it, it's got a gearbox in it, it's got a lot of bits and pieces in it that have to come together, and we did some user research on it, and for the little one, people were happy to pay about £30 for it. Because it solves not an insignificant problem. There are a lot of people out there that have to grind pills up for their cats and particularly their dogs on a regular basis, and so we knew the price point that we had to hit. Unfortunately, to get it to market, it was really important to have something that was quality, that went through all the requirements. But the client could only really afford to have a couple of thousand made. So his minimum order quantity was relatively low. And for that, we'll just sort of break down all of the various costs. And this isn't exhaustive, but it's chomping through all the bits of the costs that go into it. For the UK, we had to say, is the design finished? So were we certain that this had been tested and that this was exactly what we wanted? Could we define every component without a doubt that this is exactly what we wanted? Well, until they'd made a significant number of these and user tested it over thousands of people, you can't say that. So is it one supplier or many? Well, actually, it's many different suppliers. You've got batteries, gearboxes, injection molded components, and it's a very low shipping volume. So you can get a lot of these into a container, or you could fly these over at a modest cost. So for this one, this was certainly at this minimum order quantity, was never going to be a UK manufactured job. However, this was a piece of tooling, one of these, and it's used in the brickwork industry. to be able to run lines. And for this, we did know exactly what we want to do. It's a much simpler thing. We knew that one supplier, in fact, 2.5 suppliers could supply all the bits. It was a simple mechanical assembly, and also that the numbers involved in it were hundreds at a time, not thousands of a time. So this one, hell yeah, we made this in the UK. And why wouldn't you? It also enabled us to make changes as we went along, and keep iterating it, and build that relationship with the manufacturer. So manufacturing is about people and the processes that they bring. Volume is about refining and managing that process and strengthening that relationship. UK manufacturing allows us to create those relationships, and then build on them. So here, even this, though the client was hell bent on it being UK manufactured, it was very much, even the spring isn't manufactured in the UK. There had to be compromises, but it's manufactured and sold here and has been very successful. So I'll talk really briefly about other ways we can manufacture in the UK. So on-demand manufacture allows us, if we know exactly the components that we want, to put out to a marketplace, and get them to effectively bid for your work. That works very well if you know, I want exactly one of these bottles. I want exactly this, and I can specify it to the nth degree. But even then, the marketplaces that we're putting out to, unless you specify that it has to be made in the UK, they're always going to go outside the UK first. So check and be specific. Talk to other manufacturers within groups, because it's the only way that you'll share and benefit from their knowledge. There's a good chance that you're not stepping on anyone's toes, and they will be generous. We can make it better. So the right to repair legislation was a start, because it's encouraging people to make better quality products that can be repaired, and it allows us to think more holistically about a product. This will make a difference. Marketing has this role to play. We've got to educate and inform our clients to want better products, to care where they've come from, to care how they are made. The message is important. Valuing made in the UK has never been more important. If we want to create a change, we've got to be willing to pay for it. But also, the government is, and of our current government and any future government, has got to create an economic environment that rewards SME manufacturing. A lot of manufacturers don't get some of the incentives that are due to them. They can't engage with it because it's complex and complicated. Anyone that's heard me talk about patent box will know that that's a soapbox I'm very happy to stand on. Now, investing in automation, that's also where things will start to get better. Lights out manufacturing, where products are made without people's input. We take the labor costs out, we take one of the huge variables out. So what's the good news? And there is good news. Automation is leveling the playing field. Once we start to get large factories that are making products, even in smaller quantities, without huge amounts of labor, prices go down. By incentivizing investment in these, we see improvements. I was at a demonstration looking at robot training and arm training, and AI is enabling robot arm training to happen a lot faster, so that they can teach the tasks and then repeat and repeat and repeat and speed up. That will only see things improve further. Companies like Brompton are investing in the UK. They're about to build a £100 million factory in Kent, and they're leading the way in a lot of things. So, dead or alive? Very much alive. We've covered what manufacturing is, from building a castle and how relevant that is. We've looked at the good bits and the bad bits of manufacturing in the UK, and where the strengths and weaknesses are, and how much you have to know about your product. We've talked a little bit about what can be done about it in the investment in both the business side of it, hopefully from the government, but also how automation and AI of training of those automated systems will improve productivity and reduce costs. That's the good news. What it looks like in 10 years? Who knows? But I'm positive. And I feel that SME manufacturing is going to get easier, is going to get the playing field is going to become more level, and I have high hopes. Hope you enjoyed that. There we go, lovely people. A quick whiz through some of our stuff, and I think that what's interesting is people like Paul have faced some of these problems, have faced some of these dilemmas very much head on, and what we do see is that there are a lot of people out there that would. Their reaction is, I would like to make this thing in the UK. How can I make it possible? Or
yeah, I mean, I sort of gave up, if I'm completely honest, Nick.
Yeah.
But what was interesting I found in your talk was when you're sort of rationalizing about is it right or is it wrong for me to manufacture in the UK? In reality, I shouldn't have beaten myself up, because the production runs that I'm on and what I'm trying to achieve in getting it off the ground, actually my solution does work being manufactured abroad. One thing that I do often ponder, though, if I could get it made in the UK, it will be more expensive. That is where brand comes in and giving someone additional value for a product. But one of the things I pondered in my distant future is, as a stepping stone between, and this still relies on me growing the company, being successful, so there's a lot of caveats here, is made abroad, made in the UK. Even with all the branding and everything behind, will a consumer, when faced directly with, you can have it made here, it's another 20 quid, or you can have it made abroad and it's not. And I sort of wrestle with that one. You know, will they pay a product price that's higher? And my one solution, while I'm on this, is I think that the government should be helping UK manufacture. And I think they should be doing things like, don't pay VAT on manufactured goods in the UK. That would level the playing field for our UK workforce, our UK manufacturing. It will get people in jobs. So you'd be removing stuff for burden of the state. So I'm sure there's cleverer people out there than me with better ideas, but that's what I'd like to see for UK manufacturing.
No, and Paul, I think that that there are a lot of things that could be done. And what was interesting is that this brick tool, we worked a lot with the with the company that sells it and that commissioned us to make it, to do work with their target audience to say, okay, how much is it worth to you, this being made in the UK? And we figured that the brickwork industry may value it made in the UK. The answer was 15%. That actually they would pay 15% more for it being made in the UK. And so it was an interesting one. Anyway, let's crack on through some questions.
Nick, just before we take on some other questions, we're blessed to have Oriana with us this morning. I had a wonderful chat with her yesterday, and very into design. Had a very illustrious career in design and sustainable design. And it'd be good, Oriana, if you want to raise anything today, introduce yourself and tell the room what you do. That would be really cool.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much for that lovely intro. I love what you're doing here, by the way. I think it's highly necessary. Interesting. I've been in design. It's in my DNA since I went to St. Martin's as a student and graduated there, and been through all the sectors literally of design. So fashion, graphics, interiors, retail, TV, books, all of it. So I feel qualified to talk about design because I've lived it. But about 15 years ago, I discovered the sweet spot between design and sustainability, and loved the idea that I could do what I know, use my skill set, but to give back, to do good, you know, and be on a mission to change things through both those skill sets and the combination of them. So at the moment, interestingly, you were talking about China. I'm the Chief Sustainability Advisor and Content Director for the Sustainable Design Summits in China for Clarion Events. So I create their summits, I do the themes, I do the research, I get the speakers together, and I open the summit. So I shall be in Shanghai in June. And it's been a real eye-opener, so very relevant to what you're talking about, manufacturing, etc. But also being in that environment, I've met the most extraordinary people who are immersed in sustainability, who are experts in the field. So in a nutshell, it sort of led me to understand that there's a very low take up of SMEs and Fortune 500 companies of a sustainability advisor, person, officer, and certainly no embedded sustainability policies in their businesses. So I'm launching sort of a sustainability as a service offering, which is called the Impact Advisor, which is fractional sustainability advisors on demand, because there's a massive barrier for companies to employ someone at £200,000 a year to be their sustainability person, where they don't know what they need to be doing. There's a huge lack of understanding, knowledge, you know, which I get, but we're trying to actually provide guidance and actually get over that sort of barrier to companies taking up a sustainability agenda by providing this service. So it's a sort of low entry point for them without massive commitments of huge salaries. And because of the network of people I've met over the last 3 years doing the summits, I have access to the most extraordinary global experts in sustainability that we can draw on and offer that as a service on a fractional basis.
I'd be really interested in get in contact. I think we've got a lot to talk about. Because yeah,
I will. And one more thing I just want to say is everything that you've been saying is actually, you are talking about sustainability, but using a different language. You know, you're talking about extending product life, that's circular thinking. Yeah. You're talking about, you know, if you, rather than saying made in the UK, which is really important, I think the consumer is now looking for sustainable values embedded into products. So if you say that you're reducing the carbon footprint, if you say that, you know, you're promoting, you know, UK's talent, and you're reducing travel times, you know, emissions, etc., that actually will land really well right now, because that is what you're doing. You're just couching it in a slightly different framework.
And I think it's really important to we got Graham on the call as well, and looking at having started the B Corp process recently, and understanding some of the lifetime assessments and how to start looking at sustainability with a different set of eyes. So we got quite a lot of questions. So, but I'd love to talk to you more about it, because I think we got a lot in common. So let's crack on.
Lee, I've got a call at 10 past. Can you come on and host? Just thank Nick and
No,
so
not a problem, Ollie. So Peter, let's what's your question, Peter? Oh,
it was more of a comment about the fact that, well, it was my product. I'm selling globally, and a lot of people overseas want to actually manufacture in country. So the way I've gone about it is to look at the value of the particular parts of the system, choose one that, and also what they perceive as the bits that they want to do. So it's a bit of a negotiation and what have you. And just to cut it all short, really, what we decided is that the pod is the bit that people like. It's the wow bit. So you let them make that overseas, but the non-recurring costs in actually putting in customization is done in the UK. So you get money from it doing it in the UK. You also help them with the training, with the tooling, with the setup and all that. So you make sure it's made to the right standard. So it's a two-way process, and it also relates to the sales of the product as well, if you're selling into other countries. But yeah, I'll leave it at
that. I think one of the things that I love about manufacturing is every time it's different. Every time you've got a similar set of tools, but you're applying in a different way. So that's really cool. Graham, what you got?
So yeah, I think Oriana summed up the whole sustainability. As you know, I'm involved with helping with B Corp certification, so resource reduction, all that type of stuff. And yeah, the carbon footprint. Scope 3 is just kind of getting drilled into a little bit more, and that will have a big impact. I actually heard a term which I hadn't heard before, with friendshoring as well as a thing. You know, not only onshoring, but this thing of manufacturing in friendly nations, or maybe not necessarily in your home country, but also in Europe and so forth and so on. So there's a whole movement, a whole thinking between the wars and what happened in the Suez Canal and so forth and so on. And the other point I was going to say was, as you know, I live over in Northern Ireland, and there's this whole thing of getting Northern Ireland back on track and stuff, and the whole Intertrade UK, which will be an interesting thing to see how that kind of pans out and what support the government will actually be given to help mainland-based businesses to think of Northern Ireland as a sort of manufacturing base and use that as a halfway house, and to access to both marketplaces for products and so forth and so forth. So just an interesting, I think, juncture we're at. To be honest.
And I think it's especially for SMEs, it's important to create networks of people that do this, so you can learn from each other and not have to make the same mistakes. Because making the same mistake as somebody else is dreadful and avoidable. Yeah, Tom, what you got for us?
Well, it was just there was just a very interesting point. It was a great talk, Nick. I could listen to you all day, even though I'm a manufacturing engineering complete dunce. My interesting thing was what Paul was talking about, and you were talking about the reasons to buy. And as you guys know, one of the things that I'm very interested in is the role of culture in brand. And I think that is the key to actually surrounding this, because the story you've just told, who couldn't be proud of the story you've just told us, Nick? I kind of felt, as I say, even though it's not my subject area, I kind of felt the warmth, I felt my positivity towards it. And that actually is the key. If we can build those sorts of things into brands, which, you know, many people are doing, and the sustainability angle has a big part of it, but there's, you know, there is that a more kind of a modern British business and industrial culture, that if we can get the brands that harness that, I think are the brands who can do it and can leverage it. So just to put the signal up for brand in all this, it's a massive part of it.
And I think that a shining example of that is Brompton. And I think if you're looking for an industry leader that reflects all of the greatness, then Brompton is just a real beacon of light there. And it's one of the things that gives me hope that actually, if it's done right, it can be knocked out the park and it can be a world-leading thing.
Yeah. And I think it's just generally, Britain at the moment, we feel like we're in a position where we're a country who is in need of renewal. And I think the brands that lead with that sense that Britain can be renewed and has that bright future are going to do great things.
But also, I think what's really interesting is if you look, well, and I'm not, I'll get off this soapbox really quickly, but look at what happened to the Body Shop. You had something that was a world beater that just had the lifeblood drained out of it by we won't even go there. Neil.
Brilliant talk, Nick, and obviously I'm a huge Brompton fan as well. But let's not get into globalisation of the bicycle industry. That's another hour-long debate. I kind of you see this is very interesting because, like as Tom was saying, it's cultural. It's actually kind of like understanding what is the value of buying British or localizing. And that's something that we, mass media and etc. need to push forward. I think there's a very good positivity if we look forward generations, because there's an element of, people of our age discussing that more, view of Britain as it was, as opposed to view of Britain as it will be. And the desire to actually create microeconomies, because energy needs to be microeconomies. We know the global supply chain is broken because all the stuff from China can't get through the Suez Canal when it gets politically unstable there. There's going to be climate change and that's going to affect things as well. And I think taking into context, we actually need to localize pretty much everything, energy production, all this kind of stuff, because we're heading to a very uncomfortable time. And I feel that kind of trend, that kind of language, that kind of understanding, beyond the nice thing, obviously I'm wearing a Cornish manufactured sweatshirt this morning, so that's very helpful, which was eco-sourced. But yeah, I think it's just kind of, being able to map in those trends and values. People are moving towards brands that actually put that and putting quality and value and durability beyond fashion trends and those kind of things. I think a part of the conversation we can all help. And I guess that's also a big part of what I do, which is let's talk about what your purpose is and what values and who are your customers and how do we connect with that. But yeah, no, total agreement. But I think
I think that the more we talk about it, the better it gets. And it's things like Start Stand Up and networks like this, just the value in them, it just grows exponentially. That's cool. Andrea.
Really enjoyed that, Nick. I'm concerned on a sort of macro scale that we have a real disconnect. Several people have mentioned it about culture and things like, well, we can't open a mine in Cumbria that will produce coking coal, which is used for steel manufacturing, even though it means it's much more sustainable. We have better health and safety. We have better environmental standards than Kazakhstan, and we're not shipping coking coal around the world. Perhaps that's a moot point now that we're getting rid of our last blast furnaces. But again, that's a crazy thing. I was listening to a podcast this week from Barry Weiss, and she was interviewing a former journalist who's turned VC and a guy called Palmer Luckey, who is aptly named. He founded Oculus and became a billionaire at 21. And they were talking about how software engineers or engineers, period, are not going into civil service. They're not going into manufacturing because somehow, well, they can make more money in Silicon Valley. And they don't see the value of actually contributing, whether it's to space or defense industries or any of those things, and how that is quite a problem. So how do we overcome that? And then you end up with the respect.
And we could do another hour. We could do a whole day. I think that you bring up a really valuable point, that with career politicians that are being supported by career civil servants, that unless we educate and we involve our decision makers in a way that is a partnership, and that everyone is listening to everyone else, we haven't got a hope. But yeah, we could do another day on that. Dave.
Cool. So my question, it's a two-part question. The first one may be a bit heavier than the second. So lots of people have brought up the branding piece and everything else, right? And I don't know if there's an answer to this, but it's something I'm interested in your opinion on. You've got people like Brompton, and you've probably got newer manufacturers who get the marketing piece. But I've started working with a manufacturing engineering client, not my normal market. I've sent you a link about them, Nick, because they could be a client for Patent Box. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And they're great, but they're a family-owned business. They make sealant rings for turbochargers and all this other really amazing stuff. But you go in there, and they don't have a marketing department at all. The people that do their marketing is a team leader who happens to be young and has an Instagram account, right? So they don't get all this wonderful talk about branding and everything else. They don't get it. And the people at the top of these family-owned organizations, they're old school. So they don't necessarily get it either. And I guess because of that, maybe this space is underserved by people like Tom and Neil, who help brands with this stuff around portraying their message. I can understand it because it's a hard sell potentially to someone who, and I'm understanding in your thoughts on, is that a challenge that I've picked up from my tiny knowledge, or is this one that's more widespread? And actually, for all the government stuff, if some of the more traditional organizations don't understand how to position themselves and help their customers know how to position the value of working with a UK-based manufacturer, then that magic isn't gonna happen. And the second part, which is probably much easier, is what's the thing that excites you most about UK manufacturing right now?
So I think that to answer point one, I think that there is a hungry gap of a certain size of company, of the sort of up to 5 million turnover, and that are long established, that it's a really difficult engagement to change. You have to nudge, and they have to want to change. And equally, I'd be really interested. I suspect Oriana's seen the big side of this, and I'm sure that she's also seen very large companies that are in exactly the same position. That actually, you can just look at them and go, I can tell you now there is so much benefit for you doing this, but you just can't see it, and you don't believe it. And so I think that we all know change takes time, and it is changing. But it's like steering an oil tanker, if you'll pardon the phrase. It's little nudges and little nudges and little nudges, and it's very easy not to see that change happening. I mean, the client for this he's been a bricklayer all his life, and he's never ever his marketing is going down the pub with his next client, or sending them a bottle of whiskey at Christmas. And he's had to he's now deeply involved with every aspect of selling something online, of Shopify, of yeah, I can't tell you how steep his learning curve's been. But yeah, so I think that, and what excites me about manufacturing is automation, because we now get to a point where we're taking some of the labor out of the tasks that are repetitive, that shouldn't be done by people. And we are going to see that take off. But also to see robotic arm systems being trained by following somebody doing a task and then going, okay, now do it faster. Now do it 24/7. And so automation is what excites me.
Nice. Right, great talk. I've got a dash. I'm on sustainability.
Sorry, I've kept you. I'm guessing on quite. Yeah, Oriana, go on. Last
Yeah, I
one.
just wanted to ask, has the manufacturing industry been impacted by 3D printing so that you can print on demand, which is something that you were discussing before?
Right. A really quick one on that one. 3D printing is a fantastic process, but never ever equate it with low cost production.
Right.
For custom production, it's really for if you're producing a trainer that you are customizing the sole to the customer's own foot, unbelievably good, because you're making a different product every time. However, if you're making the same thing every time, our current manufacturing techniques will always be cheaper, will always be faster. Yes, the setup will be more expensive. So 3D printing has got a real place. 3D printing in metals is more interesting in some ways because you can do things that you cannot manufacture any other way.
Oh, interesting.
You can so there are parts of a jet engine that you can only manufacture using those processes because the geometry is designed for it. So it's interesting, but it will never a lot of the consumer market where it's price driven is less so. In saying that, you're looking at some of the local some of the Apple products. You're now into 3D printing on metals for some of those, and they're very much consumer. So hell, I might be wrong. Anyway, I think I've taken quite enough of all of your lovely time at the moment. I hope that you enjoyed that, people. I certainly did.